And joining us now in studio, Anne Cavoukian, Ontario's Information and Privacy Commissioner. It's good to have you back in that chair here at TVO.
Pleasure.
I want to remind everybody, as I did off the top of the interview with Commissioner Lewis, that we are having a live chat. So if you're watching us at 8 p.m. right now, go to our website, theagenda.tvo.org, weigh in with your thoughts and join the conversation on this Bill C-30, which has been of some controversy, I think it's fair to say.
Just a little bit.
Okay, you saw the interview with Chris Lewis. Reaction? You got like 25 pages of notes in front of you there. I'm worried that's not all from that interview, is it?
I have the greatest respect for Commissioner Lewis, but I must beg to differ. He characterizes this bill as going after child pornographers, child predators, the most serious. And who would object to that? The problem is when you look at the bill, especially Section 16 of the bill, this bill applies widely to not just serious criminal activities, not just criminal activities. It applies to everything.
Well, he mentioned that. People going after your grandmother for their money and frauding them and that kind of thing, defrauding them.
Any duty or function of a police officer falls under this bill. It doesn't even have to be during the investigation of criminal activity or a law enforcement matter. It's wide open, unfettered access, wide open to subscriber data. And we're going to talk about what that means in a moment. But let us be clear, this is not a child pornographer's bill that we can all support because we want to object to child pornographers. This is wide, unfettered access, and it imposes a mandatory surveillance regime that applies very broadly to all of us law-abiding citizens.
Okay, let me stop you there. We'll go through these bit by bit here. He gave the example of how he could use this new power to clamp down on child pornographers. You say it's wide open. So he gave his example. Can you give us an example as well of how you fear the police would use this to attack the privacy of ordinary Ontarians?
So first of all, the language in the bill, Section 16 specifically, there are no limitations on who can access what in terms of police officers. So surely, was this just a drafting error? Was it sloppy drafting that they drafted it so widely that basically the police officer could go after any kind of information at all, not just related to a criminal activity, not just related to a law enforcement matter, but anything?
He does say they're too busy to do that. They don't go on fishing expeditions.
Oh, good. Well, then let's not give them the ability to do that if they don't have time to do it anyway.
Put it in the bill.
Put it in the bill. You have to narrow it. But the worst part, it's warrantless access to subscriber data on all of us, all law-abiding Canadian citizens. Now, I want to put something to bed right away. They said, look, we're not going to be monitoring anybody's email or phone, or we're not intercepting content, we're not going to be reading the content of emails.
That's what he said.
That's what he said. I agree with that. Put that aside. This is not about interception of content, of data, of communications.
So you agree with him on that?
I do.
That's not going to happen?
That's not going to happen. Okay. What's going to happen might be worse. Accessing subscriber data in terms of your email address and your IP address, those two pieces of information combined with customer name and address will identify you and will identify the sites that you travel to in terms of various websites.
Okay, stand by 1 second, because we put this list up in the first interview, and let's put it up again, just to remind everybody. On written request, here's what C-30 would allow the police to do. Get telecom companies to provide the police with a customer's name, address, phone number, email address, IP address, and service provider. What on that list gives you pause?
The email address and the IP address, those two pieces will show where you've been, what websites you go to. Let's say you're a guy, Steve. So you go to a site on prostate cancer, and then you go to another site on sexual dysfunction, and you go to another website on incontinence. I mean, do you really want me to continue? That paints a clear picture of, associated with you, what areas you're going to for various pieces of information. If you continue to put the digital dots together, it can paint a very detailed picture just from your IP address, your email address, your surfing habits, where you're going. It is so much more revealing than, I'm so tired of the phone book example. Please, in this day and age, come on. We're using yesterday's language to talk about tomorrow's problems. This information alone, the subscriber data, can paint a very revealing picture of your interests, your activities, and who you communicate with. You can go to certain websites like people.com, put in your email address, a whole list of your activities will come out. There is so much you get just from that information. It's not the same as a phone number or a license plate number. It is far more revealing.
So when the government says, look, we are just updating our laws to comply with the technological reality of living in the 21st century, it is in fact just like updating the phone book, you're not buying.
It's not true. And don't get me wrong, I have great respect for law enforcement. There's no question they need to modernize, some of their skills and training. They need new resources on how to navigate the new online world. I don't disagree with any of that. But I don't want you to give away all of our freedoms and introduce a new surveillance regime, couching it under the term of going after the child pornographers. Please, let's call a spade a spade. This goes far beyond unfettered access to subscriber online data. It's not necessary. See, that's the other thing. Why are we doing this? They use all the language of we have to modernize and all that. But the reality is the police are really good at finding the bad guys in terms of the child pornographers. We just had a case in Ontario a week or two ago, 60 child pornographers arrested on over 200 counts. We have outstanding police services. And if you have reasonable grounds to believe that a crime has been committed, by all means, go to a judge, get a warrant. And if you say, oh, but what in an emergency, we don't have time to get a warrant, the criminal code allows for that. In exigent circumstances, you can just go and get the information absent a warrant. We have the powers now that the police need.
And they would disagree, because they would say, we did a police investigation, we uncovered 9,000 people in February who were sharing child pornography, and they were only able to arrest 60 of the 9,000 people. And that, to them, they would argue, suggests they need more help.
But I would challenge that. I would challenge their conclusion. They probably do need more help in terms of how to navigate. Of those 9,000 or however many, how many of those would they be successful in getting search? You want to search their premises. You have to get a warrant to go and search the premises, those kind of warrants. You have to have some reasonable grounds to believe that a crime has been committed. Look, we live in a free and democratic society where we believe in the presumption of innocence. I think we still believe in that. And in that world, you are free to go about your business, and unless there's some reason to believe you're breaking the law, the government, the state, can't just interfere with your personal life. They can't just listen in, and by listening in, I'm not talking interception, I'm saying accessing websites through subscriber data, seeing where you've been going, who have you been connecting with online. This is very telling information.
It's telling information, but it's telling information that in some respects does violate, let's use the example you had before, of checking out all of those websites about prostate cancer and
all that stuff.
All that stuff, yeah. But if I'm a quote-unquote innocent Ontarian who isn't breaking the law, I really don't have anything to worry about in that regard. They're not going to knock on my door because they see I'm looking at prostate cancer websites, right?
No, please, don't draw that conclusion. So first of all, you're going down the road of, well, if I have nothing to hide, what do I have to fear? And that is fundamentally flawed in terms of privacy, because the whole premise of living in a free society, freedom and liberty, means you don't have to tell the state or have the state impose their views and look at your activities. That's not how it works. Freedom means you get to do what you want, you mind your business, you're a law-abiding citizen. You don't have to tell the state any of this information or have the state come and check out your hard drive.
Okay, I appreciate that, but I also live in a community that I want to be safe, and I want my kids to be free from any risk of running into child pornographers. And he pointed out, did Chris Lewis when he was here, that it's way easier nowadays with the internet to attract and lure in unsuspecting kids.
Then fine,
so do
narrow
we need
this.
To, well,
narrow
do we need
this.
to let them have more, be more nimble and give them added resources to do that kind of thing?
I'm not going to say no outright because I want to be fair and have a discussion with them. But if that's truly your concern, you narrow this to the most serious cases of child pornography. You don't have it across the board accessible to anything. That is the enormous fear. This imposes a surveillance regime, and the telcos, the telecommunication companies, have to reconfigure their systems at considerable expense. One thing I saw today on CBC was that $80 million it was going to cost. And they have to do that so the police can look at any time, come in the back door, and perhaps go on fishing expeditions. I know the commissioner said, we don't do that. You don't know that all your people don't do that. The other thing, I don't want to leave this out, the societal effects. Freedom and liberty promote creativity and innovation. When you live in a free society and creativity, innovation thrive, this will put such a damper on that. It will stifle innovation. Because the guys who are the brilliant guys, the Steve Jobs of the world, the real thinkers and doers, they want to be doing things freely. They don't want to think the government, the state is looking over their shoulder, can look at all of their online communications and see what's going on.
The cops would say we're not interested in Steve Jobs, we're interested in the child pornographers.
But how would you know? The thing is, there's no way to know. They say, well, there's audit powers. Oh,
That's
please,
right.
look at the powers in the audit. The audit powers are so weak. They're weak. They have to report once a year, very broadly, to the Attorney General. Maybe the Privacy Commissioner might look at it. Are you giving additional resources to the Privacy Commissioner?
So you're talking about your federal counterpart now.
And provincial privacy commissioners may also be called upon. I can tell you, we don't have audit staff. If I didn't have additional resources, that audit power would be meaningless. And if you look at the way the audit powers are configured, they're not strong. There isn't an independent power of audit. It's not an independent third party who are going to be auditing these activities. It's the police auditing their own activities. That's not how audit works.
If it was your federal counterpart, Jennifer Stoddard, who had the power to audit their oversight, would that be okay?
I would be much happier than the police auditing themselves.
Okay.
But then you'd also have to give her the resources that would enable her to do that.
If this bill passes, and if the police were to, and they, let's get it on the record, they claim they would not, if they were to abuse their powers, presumably it wouldn't take very long at all for judges to throw these charges out, right? I mean, there is that safety valve there, theoretically?
See, you want to rely on this going to the Supreme Court.
I'm just asking. Because if the it's admittedly we're in the hypothetical world here, but if the government has a majority, so if they want to put this bill through, they can, and if the police like it and do with it what they will, that's the world we're going to live in.
Steve,
but we have the courts.
I don't want to go there yet. Of course, eventually we have the courts like 10 years down the road. Please, life is too short. I want to address this now. Why are we going to allow this to pass? I know the government has a majority, but look at the opposition. There's been over, I forget the number, I don't know, 110,000 people have signed an online petition against this bill. We have on our realprivacy.ca website, we have a tool, Write Your MP, to express your objections to this. Over 1,500 people have signed that. We've been getting calls constantly on our website. The point is, people are incensed about this. You're hearing about this all the time. There's a fabulous Rick Mercer YouTube. Tell your audience to look at it. It's brilliant.
We like Rick here.
I
He's
love
great.
Rick Mercer, and this one is right on. He gets the point. He basically says, keep the state out of my hard drive. I don't want them, I don't want the telcos to become agents of the state. And he's right on. The point is, we want to preserve our freedoms.
Okay, I get what you're saying on the merits of the arguments. However, the other part of this whole drama has been the public safety minister's language in the House of Commons, which was, even the OPP commissioner said it was unfortunate. He should have said what he said, and by claiming that if you oppose his law, you're somehow in league with child pornographers was not helpful. So all of those people, here's the question, all of those people who you think have signed on to your cause, are they really just people who can't stand the conservative government because the conservatives have been so ham-handed in the way that they've handled this?
I don't think so.
Is it ham-handed or ham-fisted? I'm not even sure now.
On this issue, people on both the right and the left oppose this bill. So it's not just people who don't like the conservatives, or I don't know who they are. But I know that it crosses all political spectrums. People who believe in freedom, people who believe in upholding our societies, and just look at other societies that have morphed from a free and democratic state into a totalitarian state. The first thread to unravel is privacy.
Okay, but well, I shouldn't ask. Are you going there?
I'm not going there that we're going there.
Yeah.
I'm saying this is the time, though, you raise the alarms to prevent anything going down the road, to suggest that law enforcement should have access to all of our online activities and where we're going and our subscriber data. You might think not a big deal. I assure you, people in the community, the security, privacy, tech community, they're incensed at this, that their online activities would be accessible automatically by the police, absent any reasonable grounds of suspicion to believe wrongdoing has happened.
Okay.
So this is a big deal.
In which case, the minister has said, once he sort of climbed down from his original, if you're not with me, you're with the child pornographers. He has said he's open to amendments on this.
Yes, I'm delighted.
Do you have some you want to recommend?
Absolutely.
For instance?
First, you remove warrantless access. If you want to access subscriber data, you have to have some reasonable grounds to believe that some activity has happened, some wrongdoing.
Got to go to a judge.
You get a warrant. Why is that important? Because it gives us the judicial oversight that we need. Oversight, visibility is absolutely critical. That's what preserves our freedoms.
They also say it's too slow.
It's nonsense that it's too slow. See, I reject that because they say, well, it takes too long and a crime could happen. If something happens and on an emergency basis, you have to act. There are existing clauses in our criminal code that allow for exigent circumstances and to act on an emergency basis. So I reject that.
Okay. Have you spoken to Vic Taves?
I've written to him several times.
Have you heard back?
I have not. First, we wrote a 22-page letter that has been referenced by many people. It's very detailed in terms of all the concerns we have. More recently, I've had a number of communications to Minister Taves, and I'm sure I'll be hearing from him in the near future.
You think so?
I'm really.
I mean, I guess you're a provincial.
I'm the optimist.
Yeah. Well, but you work in the province of Ontario jurisdiction, and he's a federal politician. Is it possible he thinks I have a federal counterpart I have to deal with, and I don't already have to deal with you?
That's entirely possible, and I'm happy to go through the federal privacy commissioner, of course. But we have waded into this area because A, we were asked to. B, it is considered to be such a fundamental invasion of our privacy and intrusion into our freedoms that we were asked to wade into this area, even though it is not in our jurisdiction.
Asked by whom?
So Professor Michael Geist, who is a highly respected
professor. Everybody knows Michael. Yeah.
And Professor Ian Kerr, these are highly respected professors. Ian Kerr, I love this comment. He said this bill basically introduces, it says open sesame in terms of accessing subscriber data. Everything is available, and not just for child porn, not just for predators, for anything, not even criminal activity, any kind of activity. It's wide open. Open sesame, Professor Kerr. Professor Geist, this is one of the most dangerous things that could happen, that you are requiring, compelling telcos to reconfigure their systems by law at considerable cost. Why? To enable the police to have a backdoor to access the subscriber data on all law-abiding Canadian citizens.
So if they remove the warrantless access, which was the #1 amendment you said you wanted, is the bill then okay?
No.
Still not good?
No.
Well, we got 2 minutes left. What else do you want to change?
So I want much greater audit powers. You must have...
For whom?
Well, I'd love independent audit. I would love an independent body to be able to oversee these activities. But I also want I want you to go to the courts to get a warrant. I want reasonable grounds to believe that a crime has been committed. I want visibility associated with the activities in this bill so that we can give Canadians comfort that we have the best system of privacy and freedom anywhere in the world. That's why, people say, well, what about other countries that have gone this route? Australia, for example. Sure, let's take a look at Australia. What has happened in the past 2 years? They've had this warrantless kind of access. The number of activities that have been accessed online, surveillance has gone up by 50%, over 50%. There have been that much greater access than before. And it's not like all the child pornographers have been caught. It's not that. If you give this kind of power to the police, it will be used, and there will be greater surveillance, and it will be mandatory surveillance in our free country. What about freedom and liberty?
How optimistic are you that the changes you would like to see happen, which I guess you would call a watering down of the bill, will in fact happen as it goes through committee?
I would call it significant amendments to the bill that will be required. And the only reason I'm more optimistic than I was earlier is the enormous public opposition to this bill. There was I think it was CBC did a poll, 91% of the people who responded said they rejected the bill. Kick it out of the House, get rid of it. There's been such strong opposition to this bill and such strong voicing of the importance of our freedoms. And that gives me great heart.
And we thank you for coming in today and sharing your views on it.
My pleasure.
That's Ann Cavoukian, Ontario's Information and Privacy Commissioner.